Great score, Tim, and excellent mock-up. I really like how your engraving is done so nicely, and the mock-up that's used is very realistic in a lot of ways. I mean, there are a few things that it's a little dodgy on, but so are most sound sets. So I mean, that's not a big concern. Just a couple of comments before we start. Just some general stuff for you to think about. One is, please try to maintain the same rehearsal marks that I've got. It looks like you have the sections lined up, but you don't have the right rehearsal numbers because you took away the one at the beginning, right? So like this has to be A, and I understand, folks, that in an actual concert music situation you would not have a rehearsal mark at the beginning of the piece, okay? But that is used to help me delineate the different sections for review. Okay, so if you take them out, then it creates a confusing situation. I think I was actually trying to find there was one person who didn't have one particular section evaluated just because he changed all of the rehearsal numbers. So so try not to do that. Just don't take away the one at the beginning, please. Then like there's a few other things that like some notes, some pitches are I'm not sure if they're changed or if they're wrong. I'm pretty sure that they're unintentionally wrong. In these motives and so on, and some of the harmony. I'm not going to dwell on it, but just that along with the kind of slower tempo, like the kind of not following the pianist's tempo as I recommended in my pitfalls video, and other sources, sort of suggests to me that you might have copied this from a different source, or done it like written out your own piano score and then kind of run into some problems of pitch and so on because of all the insane amount of sharps that happens in the middle. So yeah, try to use the template if you can. If you did, and I'm just flapping my gums for no reason, then try not to change the pitches of the things that I think pretty much usually I get it all right. Unfortunately, I uploaded an earlier draft by accident at the beginning of the challenge, where there were a couple of missing notes. It wasn't that there's like one note that had been copy pasted wrong, and then there was one or two missing notes. But I think like in general, it didn't have as many problems with different with the wrong notes and so on as I'm seeing in your score. So yeah, so just watch out for those things. And just talking about that tempo, one of the reasons why I always work with an excellent pianist, and have like since the beginning of these challenges, whether it was a source that was uploaded to IMSLP, that was that I used because I could use it, or whether I personally approached the pianist and had them record something and then use that, which I've done two or three times, and then at least once I asked to use the professionally recorded version of, and that was this year, right? So the reason why I do those things is because I really, really want my orchestrators to listen to things like tempo, things like nuance, and all those other kinds of things, right? And I feel that, like, at least in this piece, not upping the tempo and upping the tempo and upping the tempo means that things start to drag in the middle rather than sound more and more exciting. I mean, I think Barvinsky just built it in to be faster and faster. Despite the way that his tempo markings are arranged in the score, I think it's pretty obvious that he intends things to amp up, to precipitoso, as I marked in the template, right? So just watch out for that. The tempo really means a lot, especially for your mock-up, right? And little nuances and inflections of tempo. We've heard in some of these other mock-ups that have been adjusted and so on, and give the mock-up a more realistic kind of a sound. Right? And so, I mean, the thing that I most worry about, none of that is fatal to your orchestration necessarily, but it's more learning to manage tempos is part of working up a good presentation, which is kind of what the mock-up is for, right? And that gets you more work. Right? So, I mean, I'm not on the side of mock-ups, but they do have their uses, and they can really be made to communicate a lot when the tempo is adjusted the right way, which I didn't feel it was in this score. All right, so those are just a few opening remarks. I shouldn't go back so far. So we're going to start here at D. So I really like the fact that you did not go diminuendo on us here. You just kept the power going. And I'll have a lot to say about the way that you use different instruments in here and what you left out and what you could have put in and so on. But let's just take a look at this. This should be rehearsal E, everybody. Okay, E for everybody. What I'm most concerned with is how you fade it away at E, not D. So, yeah. I do not think that the second half of the bar needs to have a complete a complete fermata across the entire thing. I think you could, obviously, like the way that this is scored, dotted quarter note, bum 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 bum. I mean, it is fine the way that it is, but just a little unclear and a little imprecise. But that's all right because everybody will just be watching the conductor, so it's not a really critical thing. You're using like fortissimo piano and here fortissimo pianissimo and so on. Yeah, that's all good, but like the purpose of this is to fade out, right, rather than to jump down. So we're simulating the effect of the piano chord crashing, and then a natural decay from all voices in the piano chord, and then the pianist simply lifts the notes that aren't being played to leave the B behind, right? So like by that token, everything should have been decaying the same way rather than just suddenly dropping down to leave the string. So the strings, what happens is that the string octaves enter the sound picture really, really quickly. Now here, I feel that this niente diminuendo is really unnecessary. Everybody is listening to, it's like, where is the attention focused? If the attention is completely focused on the fade, then niente is cool. But if attention is focused elsewhere, which it will be, then this niente hairpin makes absolutely zero. It just doesn't really mean anything in terms of a musical effect that really stands on its own. So you might as well just have diminuendo down to triple P, and you get exactly the same effect that you're imagining, right? So seriously, like niente crescendo, niente diminuendo, right? Playing down at that level, like say like a niente passage, where say like clarinet is playing really incredibly softly, or the saxophone's playing subtones or whatever. So only use those effects when the attention of the audience is completely focused on them. Okay? Otherwise, it's just unnecessary hassle for the player. I mean, in this case, it's not really a hassle. It's just kind of, it's kind of pointless when everybody is really listening. Like the audience will be listening to this. Oh, the strings faded away down to nothing. Oh, I didn't even notice. So if the audience would not notice it, don't bother, right? It's just sort of like saying, while you walk off stage, and you walk into the darkness, out of the footlights and everything else, and nobody can really see you, I want you to do a handstand. Right? It's that kind of thing. So, yeah, so just don't even bother. Oops. Sorry about that. Very sensitive today. Okay, so everything else I'm cool with. Okay. So now we've got our contrabassoon. Bo, 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 bo. I can't sing that low. And then bum, 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 da, 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 dum. So like right in here, yeah, bass clarinet. Yeah, so that all works good. So I would fade in the bass clarinet rather than having it just play together with the contrabassoon, right? Because the contrabassoon is already going to have a very thick texture here. Now, once again, I'm going to get back to my lecture on the difference between piano and woodwind slash string articulation. So you are choosing to take the tenuto articulation from the piano part, right? So instead of having bum, 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 there's really nicely articulated separate notes, you're going do, 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 do. Right, so that's what tenuto is. Okay, for strings, it's zoom, 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 zoom. Okay, so just it is a note that is blocky on purpose, right? So does this need to be blocky on purpose? Probably what will happen is, after playing it a couple of times, the players will start to gravitate more towards shaping the notes in a more natural way rather than just like do 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 do. And sometimes they'll interpret it as like almost like a legato do 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 do. So yeah, so just think about it. You could put a slur over these tenuto marks, and you could get this really nicely pulsed portato. Ooh, 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 ooh. You know what I mean? So rather than just like do do do. All right, and then leading forwards, and once again, I think that you have to think about how do you want your transition to be? Do you want a handoff, which is when one instrument stops before the next one starts? Do you want a dovetail in which both instruments play on the same the same duration note before the next one? The first one ends on the same duration as the next one starts. Or do you want an overlap? So this is like an overlap. So the original instrument keeps playing, and then the second instrument plays over it, right? So if you were going to do this, I would get rid of the tenuto mark, absolutely, right? Because you want the shape of this phrase to match the shape of the note underneath it. Yeah. Yeah, and then and once again, like here, Barvinsky didn't even mark a tenuto, right? So you're adding like do or do, so it doesn't really have that really beautiful color like do 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 do. It's just do do do, right? So just watch out with the tenuto. Yeah. Okay. So I like the idea of pianissimo trumpets harmonizing between the octaves. That is very cool. Especially like with the color of the clarinet and the oboe working together here. Yeah. I almost wish that there had been like more in the way of octaves here, right? Because it's basically just these are the same exact pitch, right? Playing together, and then they end in harmony along with the trumpets and so on. And then here you've got like this real icy stuff happening here, doubling with the piccolo. That's kind of cool, just as long as it doesn't overdo it. Like in the mock-up, it's just sort of really abrupt and kind of in your face, and I think that's really completely not necessary. It is fine already. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's all right. I sort of miss the C thirds, right? Like here we got the you're sort of combining A thirds, right? So you're using the A from the from the chord above, and you're adding a C and so on. When really this could be C thirds here above, and then there are C thirds below that are part of the octave melody, right? But since we don't have an octave melody, right, I just miss that sense of open space. All right, and then now English horn once again. Don't you want da 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 nicely rounded at the end of each note, so it's like really, or maybe even legato da da. So just maybe rethink all those tenutos. Zoom, 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 zoom. Maybe I'm overdoing it here, but yeah, maybe just ease back on it a little bit. Yeah, so here, like, you have muted pianissimo violins doubling the English horn here. Not really so sure if it'll come through at blending at forte espressivo. There are a few other places where you have things that really they don't balance in the mock-up and they won't balance in real life. And here's one of those spots. I feel that the strings will be so weak here and so inconsequential that they really won't contribute very much. I would say mezzo piano if you want a nice, beautiful blend with your English horn, and then both of them diminuendo down to, like, maybe the strings could diminuendo down to pianissimo at this point. Yeah, I'm just gonna check. Yeah, so piano espressivo. All right, so like here's another thing. What is supposed to be espressivo here, right? It is the melody part, not the accompaniment, right? You really want, you know what I mean? You don't need this, you don't need these people here to be going, ah. You don't need that up there. You just need this to be espressivo. Leave the espressivo in the melody, not in the accompaniment. This could even be like non-vibrato, right? You just get a really icy sound there. Especially since, like, and here you're saying espressivo, you want the player to vibrato on the artificial harmonic is what it sort of suggests to me in your solo part here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and there's one other thing here too, okay, and that is maybe I'm kind of going overboard with this, but I think that this also does not have to be niente. Like, is anybody going to notice the oboe fading in? Like, whether the oboe tries really, really hard to do, like, say, a tongueless attack, right? Which is the closest thing that can happen. But like a tongueless attack doesn't mean that it insinuates like, yeah. Okay. It just means that the sound kind of doesn't. It is starting without going ta, but it still is going to. It is still not going to be that superbly, subtle kind of a attack that a clarinet can do, right? So I would say that, like, maybe it's the oboe that should be playing this, and the clarinet that should be playing this, if you really wanted that niente fade in. But I would say leave it as it is, but just have triple P, okay? Don't overdo it on the whole niente stuff, all right? It's not really. So you're not really doing a lot. Just triple P, okay? All right, so now let's keep forging ahead. This was kind of a cool idea with these sounds, and then really soft, heavy brass and oboes. This was cool. I was just not so sure about how you're dropping us off a cliff here, because, like, if you were dropping us off the cliff at the end of a phrase, that would make sense. However, you're dropping us off the cliff, so right when all these instruments are playing beautifully in the melody, and so all of a sudden you get this, this kind of a a big surge. So nobody's going to be paying attention to how you scored your melody beautifully in these softer parts. Maybe rethink this. And yeah. And then also, like, if we're assuming pianissimo here, I got to tell you that you're not going to get a pianissimo here on this G third from your trumpets. Right? You might be thinking, well, okay, but by that time I have this big crescendo. But you're sending your trumpets higher and higher. Yeah. So that's another thing that's a little like, you're assuming that things are very soft right here, but they won't be. They'll be more like mezzo piano to mezzo forte, and on that B, probably more like forte, right? So there's a lot going on here. This could easily have just been played by oboes, right? And had the trumpet more integrated, especially since you're like on top of that you're stacking flutes and so on. So this really kind of just gets completely buried by this surge here, and the harp is, forget it, it's gone. This is kind of cool though. Throwing in this E, which is going to actually sound above the piccolo. Still, I mean, what can... It's almost like this entire chord is wasted because of the surge here. Anyways, but not to mention vibraphone. Nobody will be able to hear the vibraphone, right? So it's just, this really is at odds with all the other beautiful stuff that you've scored. Yeah. So I'm noticing something here, which perhaps I should have pointed out a little earlier. Okay, and that is that that you are, like, you didn't change the time signature back to 6/4 time at the quasi tempo 1. Okay, so that's really, 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 really important that you do that and not stay in 12/8, because that forces everything else to become syncopated. So the way that the conductor would deal with this is just to say, look, I don't think that the composer or the arranger understood here that this should be a 6/4. So like everything is sort of scored in 6/4. So I'm going to be conducting in 6. So everybody follow that. But like, you don't want that moment of embarrassment in the rehearsal hall, where the orchestra sort of looks at you like, geez, why didn't he just do it in 6/4? So seriously, try to follow what happened. This is another thing that makes me wonder whether or not you used the template, right, which had all the time signature changes and so on. Yeah, so go back to 6/4 here, right? Sorry, I forgot to say that earlier, but I was kind of looking at other things. Yeah. All right. Yeah, but like right here, what's important? Da 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 bum bum. The implied leap here. And this is beautiful. The horns, nice soft horns, nicely scored, I would say. There's a little bit of weirdness in the horn scoring earlier in the arrangement, but we'll get to that. Yeah. See, I mean, I think that just like there's really strange dynamics here. I mean, I feel that at the very least there should be a little surge here. Da 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 da. Then you can crescendo there. Da da dum. And then boom, you hit this. But like, you go forte pianissimo, but there's like no sense of that the melody continuing on in a really emotional way. I mean, you have a leap here. It's not the leap up to the F sharp here, but but I just feel that we're missing something here. And what else is happening here? Like doloroso, right? So there is, the surge is actually here in the original score, right? And then from there, I would say ease off gently. So it's really for all parts, right, are intended to surge, and there has to be the sense of walking down above, like. So it has to. I just think that there's some bits missing here, you know, and this sort of threw everything off kilter, the way that it was scored. Okay, then continuing on. Straight mute. I think if you just say mute, that's like, you know, if you if you use a mute before, I'm not remembering all of a sudden, but yeah. You know what? Right in here, I would use both tenor trombones rather than the bass trombone on the bottom because A, you want things to be incredibly delicate right here. Not that a bass trombone can't play it, but you really want the players who are sitting next to each other to just absolutely nail this, right? To just be completely in sync. The second trombonist job is really a lot like the second horn player's job. It's just to completely be in sync with the first. So yeah, so it's just much more natural for this to be a second part. All right, and then da 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 da. Yeah, this is all nice. I like the sort of change in texture and change in function right in here. All right, and then we have our little piccolo and trumpet thing happening here with the pizzicato. Okay, that's all. That's cool. Da da da. Yeah, so the voicing of this chord here, you know, even though it is like it is the same as what's in the score, it just feels a little unnatural. Yeah, it's because of the way everything else is. You know, it's because you've got the E in the bass, right? So, so yeah. I mean, I would say go to a G here. You know, this does not need to just because it is doubling the melody stretched out across doesn't mean that it needs to maintain that doubling when you get to the harmony. Try going to a G here instead of an E, right? And then everything else will fall into place really nicely. Right, and this is really cool. Right, yeah. And that's all really cool. Yeah, so this is what I would call yeah, this is what I would call an overlap, right? Because this is like sounding D, right? And then this, and it continues on as the bassoon comes in. So there's absolutely no sense that the two parts are sort of seamlessly handing off one to the other. It really is just just one note kind of lazily hanging on while the other one starts under it. Yeah. And I mean, this is really nice in here, but I mean, do we need that? Do we really need that high E? You know, I mean, you have so many really high notes already, you know, piccolo and so on. Do we really need that? You know, it's sort of like, it really just feels like a callback to what happened before, rather than just really everything coming to this beautiful soft ending, right? Anyways, it's just a matter of proportions, right? But really cool ending. Really enjoyable. So yeah, so just look for some of those things, play around with it a little bit, and see how it sounds in the mock-up, right? And yeah, and then change this back to 6/4, and then everything will fall into place much better. And now back to what is actually D, not C. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on here. And a lot of stuff that could be easily made to work better, right? And some things that probably don't work at all. Okay, so let's go over them one by one. Okay, starting with the cascading octaves. So, like, here you have just like single pizzicato notes sort of scattered across the orchestra. And I would, I mean, and like it's a neat idea just in terms of like your acoustic landscape, right? I would say like psychoacoustics and the stereophonic landscape, right? It is a cool idea to have the different little bits and pieces coming from different parts around you, especially if you have if you have your second violins off to the right hand side, which kind of doesn't happen anymore. So it would be something that really more the conductor would notice. There would be a little bit of randomization, say, for somebody sitting in the stalls. Just a little sidetrack here for my North American viewers that the ground floor seating is called the stalls, which is kind of an unromantic. I immediately think of like a bathroom stall. So that's the stalls, and but in America, for our international viewers, that is called the orchestra, right? Which I guess the connotation was not lost on the American concert goer. So so like if you're sitting in the stalls, the ones that are on the orchestra floor, then you might hear some of the sound sort of variegated. And if you were maybe on the balcony right over the orchestra, you would hear like the sort of tapestry of notes plucking in different places. But the problem is that like it is really kind of a lot of effort of just like the timing, like to try to get it all to sort of fall in place at the right time. And the other issue too is that like if you disregard my advice and you don't have any kind of increase of speed, any increase of tempo, then it just really all sounds like do do dee do da. It really sounds like very very paced, right? There isn't a sense of kind of momentum. That's the problem with the adjustment of speed issue, right? So like for instance here, if you're saying okay, quarter note equals 88, then you go a little bit slower and then you go to a tempo. So if your mock-up is set for quarter note still equals 88, then it kind of doesn't make any sense in 12/8 because here we're beating in 6 at 88, right? But here we're beating in 4, and that's what Barvinsky wants. He wants the tempo of the single beat here of 88 to be applied to the dotted quarter note here, right? Which I think is something that I also had in my template. Which didn't get used by a lot of these later full orchestrations. So like we hear the effect of just never really shifting from that tempo and getting any faster than here, right? So this could have been quite a bit, quite a deal faster, like about a third again as fast, right? And then kind of going into this, it could be even faster than that and even faster, and then amping up the speed until finally you're just going nuts right in here, right? Then Allargando takes us back to like, it's like if there wasn't an implied accelerando throughout the middle of the piece, why would Barvinsky need to say quasi tempo 1 here, right? It does not have anything to do with the Allargando. All right, so sorry, I keep going the wrong direction here. Okay, So that is one thing that is also going to affect how like if you keep everything really slow, then it's also really easy to manage, right? Beep, boop, boop, bop, bop, right? And people are really basically counting eighth notes at this point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But but the conductor will be beating in 4, and they'll want to take it faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so what I'm getting at here, by a really, really long way around, is that I feel that at the very least, your players should play 2 beats, right? So it would be a matter of like going pluck, pluck, that kind of thing. Just just like kind of going back and forth. But like rather than just like breaking it up so much, you might need it more integrated, and that probably spoils the entire purpose of what you were doing with making this more Doubinski. But if there is a way of like maybe having octaves like and starting an octave higher too with this do 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 like it's and not dropping the octave here just because it is that way in the piano part, right? The drop of the octave here in the piano part is because of the introduction of the middle voice. It becomes more prominent and it creates a focus for the pianist that is more centralized. So Barvinsky needs to bring those octaves down, right? But there's no reason why you need to do that. You need to keep it up because you're adding more weight here in other parts. All right, so that's one concern. Now I love this high sounding F sharp, just sort of singing away. That's a lovely idea, and nice to have some extra harmony up there around the piccolo player. Okay, so the problem here is with so much pizzicato, what chance does the harp really have to say something that is intelligible, right? So this is something that really, just like everybody out there, watch out when you have harp doubling pizzicato. The pizzicato always wins. When you have harp in the vicinity of other stuff that's going on, you can mark it mezzo forte all you like, but it is still not going to be able to be heard clearly above all this pluck, 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 right? I mean, you'd have to really divide where the different pizzicato is happening. This pizzicato is across the whole range of the orchestra. If the pizzicato was really deep and the harp was really high, doing these, cool little glittery patterns, then you'd have a shot. If the harp was really low and kind of like glissandoing around and like plucking big buzzing octaves and so on, and you had really subtle pizzicato way up top, then the harp would have a chance. But the harp doesn't have a chance here, and you can hear it in the mock-up, or rather I should say you can't really hear it in the mock-up. Because on top of all of that, we also have horn in here, and all these other elements here, bass clarinet coming in, and trombone, and so on, and that further sort of buries what's going on here in the harp. Now, if the harp were playing like higher pitches glittering downwards or cascading downwards, like maybe an octave or two higher than the pizzicato here in the violins, that would be helpful, right? Probably more helpful. Now, there's one other thing, and it's just a matter of taste, and that is like how many upsweeps to the next section can you get away with, right? Like you got one here, you got one here. And there was another one, wasn't there? Yeah, right here. But that's not really to the next section. The next section is here. Yeah. And then there's one there. Yeah, so really watch out for upsweeps on the harp, right? They can yeah, because like in here you just have a big phrase of them, right? So we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, just watch out about adding too many upsweeps, especially at places where it's like you're pointing to the next section saying, hey, take a look at that. Or, hey, we're going there, right? So it's incredibly useful for that. So just use it sparingly. All right, so here we got some really high scoring here. Right, going to D sharp. So, yeah, I mean, it's a cool idea to have high bassoon and piccolo playing in octaves. And then, yeah, it's a little strange here that like you've got the way that the harp is scored out here. Not it's sort of seems like parallel motion at first, and then it sort of changes where the line is. Okay, well that's all good. So yeah, and then you have trombone coming in here. I mean, right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So some of the harmony parts and so on. I get it. All right. Yeah. I think it's a cool idea. I just worry about a couple of things. One is like, okay, first thing is this should be marked solo, right? And that way the conductor will just get everybody else to back the hell off, right? So, and you really have to tell the piccolo what dynamic they are right here, right? Because if they play too loudly, then forget about anybody really clearly hearing the bassoon, right? And the same thing is true for your brass. Everybody here should be piano or even pianissimo, right? You just really have to stay the hell off of anything that could possibly that's overtones kind of drown out what the bassoon is doing. Right? The greatest bassoon solo of all time has no accompaniment at the beginning, right? And then when like that's the Rite of Spring, right? And then when it adds the accompaniment, it's just like one or two instruments, like bass clarinet and so on. So and it just really is able to hold its own like that, right? But it's a kind of a strange thing, you get up to that high place there, and it's a question of whether or not there really are any dynamics, like there are any is it soft or is it loud or what is it, right? It might be soft compared to other instruments, but it certainly isn't soft when you're sitting next to the bassoon, right? But is it really loud, right? So yeah, so just really be careful when you have a high bassoon solo like this in a texture where you've got a lot of brass coming and going, and they just have to soften. Just really, really stay the hell out of the way here. It would have been like perhaps more safe to have the strings taking these roles, right? And maybe harp and vibes and so on taking the octaves. But I really like the pizzicato, sort of playing the cascades. That's kind of cool. And then like in here you have flute and solo violin doubling. Now you absolutely never need to. Yeah, you don't need to do this. You don't need to tell the players how to bow. And I would even just say in here, probably what's going to happen is the concertmaster will just chop these, and they'll just go down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Right? That's just a much more common sense way of playing this. You just, sure, I mean, if you just like you say, oh, could you slur across the downbeat there? They'll say, all right, that's fine. But like I don't really see the need for it, and you end up like having like no emphasis. Like here, you're going yada da da, right? Bum bum. So why can't your soloist go ba bum? Also add some emphasis on the downbeat. All right. But I mean, cool little bits and pieces of, kind of the bassoons going back to a support role, and I really like everything in here. I love the simplicity of it. All right, then here you have molto crescendo, and I'm a little worried about molto crescendo to nothing, right? I would prefer that you would go molto crescendo to a note that would then like sort of dovetail to the start of other pitches. Right, rather than just going because like the sudden dropout is going to definitely be felt. It's not going to be like a smooth da da and everybody ta da. So just I would say connect to a pitch and then fade out quickly. I'd probably rather than just going da da and then nothing. Just like maybe get to the note and then fade out over like maybe the course of a dotted quarter or a dotted half note. Right. Yeah, and then you've got your big swoop here. Generally speaking, I like to put it's a sort of a courteous thing to put a pedal diagram on, over or next to your glissandos, right? Just to really make sure that your harpist knows what the landscape is, because it certainly is different here from where it was before, right? Here you got naturals and all this other stuff going on, so this is different timbral landscape. The harpist is not going to know how to set their pedals. They absolutely need to do it. You need to work it out, and then you need to put a pedal diagram there. Or you could do that whole thing where you write in every single pitch, but a pedal diagram is exactly the same thing. Yeah. Okay, so suspended cymbal from triangle, yeah. Okay, so here we're getting into the sort of leaping octaves right in here, where we've got our Ravel chords. Yeah, and I like the simplicity here in your strings. Like you're just keeping it octaves in your violins. And then here in the violas and cellos and so on, they're all just going like playing this sort of leaping pizzicato. And I guess this will more or less work. Yeah, the players might need to like practice it a little bit, practice it up, but it will pretty much work, especially if they have the timpani to kind of play against. Yeah, so octaves in the upper strings, harmony in the winds, really nicely done. So you have this tendency to just like throw in really high pitches a lot, and maybe like just save it up, right? Just a little goes a long way, right? Do you want to always ornament like the peak of a phrase with just jumping in some piccolo right at the end? Whereas like, you're keeping your strings kind of low here, where they could be playing octaves, right? And getting higher and higher, rather than just leaving it all to the winds. But cool horn scoring. Yeah, and I like this push right in here. Once again, forte piano. Does it need to be forte piano? Maybe it just needs to have a diminuendo. Okay, all right. So now here we get to the our 11 bars of madness, right? That everybody has to score, and I think it is absolutely great that you had two different ways of approaching it. Okay. So I'm wondering, like, even if there could have been a third way, or like when you get to this second way, it could evolve into even something else, so that like it isn't just up and down harps and right. So you aren't just setting how everything is going to happen and it stays in its lane. Because here's the thing, like with really impactful scoring, where everybody is just slamming away like this and kind of screaming. It wears out the listener after a while if there isn't any kind of evolution or arc or something. And here the scoring is really simple. It's just octave melodies and repeated notes in between the octaves, and then these little arcs and so on. Okay, so I feel that you're making a few possibly intentional additions to the harmony, which I don't feel really work. All right. And that's basically it's this B, right? And I understand like this B natural, I should say. I understand the motive of like wanting to connect to the C sharp, right? Like you're sort of walking down to C sharp, right? Or walking, up to C sharp here, and then down to A sharp. Okay, I get that impulse, but I just feel that like it ends up messing with the melody, right? Yeah. And then there are some melody notes in here that are just clearly wrong, right? So that those need to be fixed. So yeah, so I'd say just keep it at B sharp. I mean, there's a reason why it's at B sharp. It really, really works well with. I think that Barvinsky's sense of harmony was pretty damn advanced for an 18-year-old. In an 18-year-old pianist, harmony student, child prodigy, whatever. Kind of living a little bit on the fringe, but not so much. Right? Obviously, some of the bigger cities in Ukraine were getting manuscripts from France and or not manuscripts but publications from France and so on, and certainly all of the great Russian composers would have been very well known to everybody, and they also push in that harmonic direction a little bit. So yeah, so that's one thing, and the other thing is that you really have a fat low end here, right? So what is really happening here in the bass in the piano part is this, right? Just really solid octaves. However, you are shortening those octaves. You're not holding them all the way through the bar, like dotted. You're just going bonk, bonk, right? And instead, we've got this. It's really kind of like barking, and really is kind of gruff and sort of brutal down there. So all the more reason why to not add a B natural here. It's just the change of harmony just has so much power, right? It just gets a little out there, and yeah. And then with that much weight, how powerful can this melody be in the mid range, or sort of, it's not mid range, it's sort of in the tenor register. All right, so you've got violas and cellos, sort of violas playing in their tenor register, cellos playing in their tenor register, violas sort of playing kind of upper and middle, and then that is combined with clarinets, right? So here so you're saying A2 over and over again. So it sort of looks like a copy paste error. Okay, but oh, I see, because you're going from intervals. Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all cool, but yeah, and then you've got trumpet on top. Just checking, yeah, and that is also A2, A due. So, and then all right, and then you add this octave on top. So I feel that it's just a little. You're keeping things, like you're trying to keep your brass from getting too loud, right? But you are giving them accents. So mezzo forte with an accent, the accent is forte, right? And then here you got this portato, which is more of a floating or throbbing kind of a sound, like right? So it doesn't really have that kind of, doesn't really have that big pushing power. Yeah, and then this, some of this is and isn't accented. It's a little strange. I guess I'll just consider those inadvertent omissions. Yeah, so I just feel like it's really kind of gravelly the way that this is set up until you get to the flutes here, and it's really going to have this heavy mid-range to low-range kind of weight to it, and I'm not so sure that the melody here is high enough. The trumpet is, but it's just really cruising right over the top of perdition here, and also it'll have to compete with everything that's going on here in the strings. So it's a bit of a balancing act. It's not impossible, but I think it still needs a little bit of work, and I'm not too sold on the portato here. It's kind of it'll be almost bouncy there, and especially if you amp up the speed like it's supposed to be, you know. I'm not so sure that you've got above, and then you've got bump 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 below. I'm not sure that those kind of match up in terms of like their clarity. Yeah, but I mean here it starts to get pretty good. I'd say like your big octaves. I'm not so sure that you need the cellos at this point, but I mean that's okay. You can leave them in. And then clarinets and flutes and so on. Right, and then trombones and bassoons are kind of taking over the arcing stuff, and you've got horns kind of pushed a bit high, and kind of nothing going on with your double reeds here. Yeah, there's possibly more that could contribute here, some problems that need solving. Like for instance, firming up these middle strings here, and the melody would have been so easy for a couple of horns. Right, and just it would give those strings a push that they don't have with the clarinets. All right, and then here you're going for the here accents once again. We have mixed articulation here with the horns kind of going do 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 do, and the trombones going bum 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 bum. Right, so maybe there could be a little bit more clarity in there, or unity. Yeah, but the trumpet, like just as long as you keep the trumpets together, it'll be the melody will be nice and fierce. So yeah, so here is where I would say, like, if there was any chance of evolving this a little bit, going towards what is actually E, then I think that, like, and that really also leading up to the bum 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 melody right in here, then I think that, and then like at this point, like things could be even kind of draggy, Yeah. One way or another, I don't care if it's fortissimo, pianissimo, it still needs a diminuendo mark at the end, just so that just really telling the player that they're going to draw off. Okay, but I mean, otherwise cool. Like I just think that there's a lot of energy in here. It's just a matter of like lining it up and getting it to really work together. I would avoid the portato. That would be like my biggest sticking point, and I would try to firm up these strings here with something a little more powerful than the clarinets. But anyways, like the awesome D section. So now, back to the beginning. All right, so we kind of are immediately faced with something I talked about before, how pizzicato absorbs the sound of the harp. And, I mean, you couldn't hear harp there, could you? Right? And then here, like, you have this tie, which is really making no difference whatsoever. Like, when, in the up against these ties, right? The harp is such a delicate sound. Everybody would have to be playing incredibly softly for you to hear it right here. And I would think even like just completely cut the pizzicato. And if you had these instruments up here, if you wanted the harp to sound, you would have to mark it at you'd have to mark these winds at pianissimo, and you'd have to mark the harp at like mezzo piano or mezzo forte to get a balance there. Right, so I think the harp is just not happening here. Like if you had like tremolo, like tremolo harmony in the strings at triple P, or at pianissimo, and like maybe like a single, or like no winds, and then just had the harp play the melody in harmonics, then I think that you would you get something really great happening there. But it isn't the melody, is it? It is the harmonization. Okay, so one thing that I'll kind of comment on in general here, that there is a really heavy bass going on in a lot of places, and some places where like you're kind of leading the harmony in a certain direction, but then you don't complete like the implication of that motion. And you play around with Barvinsky's harmony a lot in here by changing the bass. And just a real point here, and that is, what is Barvinsky doing here? Is like he is emulating early impressionist music. So, for instance, he's got not an E minor chord here, but he's got a G major 6 chord, right? The resolution to the starting off with a D major 6 going to a G major 6 chord. And then later on, he has, what's the bass here? It is like a pedal D, not E or A, right? So it's just the D is kind of writing the bottom there. So when you take away those influences, those gestures, that shape, that structure, that architecture, then what you get is romantic music. Now, obviously, that is your influence. You have a lot of glissando, and you have these racing scales going upwards, and a lot of other things. And I think that's completely fine, like reinterpreting this as a romantic piece. But just so long as we're completely aware here that doesn't necessarily get closer to the 18-year-old Barvinsky, right? It's so just watch out. Like if your intention was to interpret this in a style of Barvinsky, this is not the way to do it. But all the same, I'm not blaming you for going in a different style. That's totally cool. All right. So I am not judging people's musical taste so much, or their intentions, or their personal style. My only dog in this game is to see if there are ways of strengthening the approach, or to comment on the approach that's being used in ways that to understand it better, right? And there's a thing that I really like about this prologue, and that is that you are progressing the texture just like it really, really needs, so it can tell an emotional story. Yeah, so like the pizzicato, like forget about the harp, but the pizzicato works really nicely here with the clarinet and flute playing in octaves, which continues on. Trumpet coming in here. Yeah, and in this case we are doubling the melody. You're doubling the clarinets here with the trumpet. Yeah, and just some strings, some violas in here, and so on. Right, and so did you notice how this was kind of the hardest to really understand? Like that, like you sort of hear the violas here a bit and the vibraphones doubling, but the harps kind of disappear, right? And that's just because of the weight of the trumpet and so on. Then we change to a different melodic texture here for more combination. So English horn, an octave higher than bassoon, with the trombone actually doubling the English horn. So here's where you kind of have to make a choice, like which one of these instruments is really the more important one, because the trombone will blow anybody out of the water any day of the week, hands down. So I would say that if you want a blend here, then the trombone has got to start at pianissimo and crescendo to a mezzo piano, and that is the only way this is going to come through. Now, something else I noticed, that you are consciously choosing to go portato here, da, da, and that's fine with me, just as long as like you really are aware of it. But why put a portato on the upbeat ta ta? Like it's like a doot, right? It's not like a da da. It's like not a shaped note. It's kind of got less sensitivity, less nuance to it. It's it's just like a kind of on and off sort of a note, right? Yeah. I just watch out. Don't use too much tenuto in really sensitive passages. right? And then like the little back and forth between your melody here and the da dee da 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 dee da da. That's kind of nice in the violins. Then your original color comes back. Bum 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 bum. I feel that this idea da dum is underpowered, right? Like you've only got it in the trumpet, which you might think, well, that's strong enough, isn't it? No, dun 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 dun. Right. So like here, like you go up instead of down, so we don't have the sense of the line telescoping like it does in the piano part, right? And then it just kind of once again we have a really high note as everything else kind of calms down. So it kind of sort of like having all of this high stuff in here sort of kind of keeps the focus of the listener. It sort of distracts the focus of the listener at times, like upwards, when it really should be focusing on really cool things like these soft mallets and the bass drums and the way everything is kind of coming together very softly. Then we have this really high E in here as well, right? doubling the flute. So so just watch out for that. It's the kind of thing that it's like a vocabulary word, right? So like anti-disestablishmentarianism, right? Like how many times can you use that in a sentence? So just careful about adding certain effects frequently. Is all I'd say. Just watch out. I mean, like you're using them in beautiful ways. It's not that you are orchestrating anything in a bad way. It's just that like it's a question of proportions, right? How many times can we use that spice? All right, now right in here, I think you could hear right away in the mock-up that this became invisible, and it will. It's because you just have like even though you're marking this piano here, like you have this grumbly contrabassoon down here, and you've got your horns. Now let's talk about that horn scoring. Here you're ending in octaves, right? And here the horns are working together in these intervals to just really try to nail them, right? So you know who that's a job for is the first and second. And you could be scoring this in like first voice intervals. That's all completely fine. This does not have to be the third part. I wouldn't give this to the third, I would give this to the second. Because you end in an octave, and the octave tuning between the first and the second is so perfect, right? Or should be. Then here, like you've marked horns 1 and 2, 3 and 4, you really have, you've outlined who works where and where they are. And here you're saying a due, right? A two horns. So shouldn't these all be, like, shouldn't both of these parts be the same 2 pitches in each part, right? This A is second, is also a second horn part, and this C sharp is the third horn part. Here's a place where the both pairs of horns should be working together in pairs, right? And then here, both pairs of horns should be working together in octaves. All right, and then you got a lot of trombone in this, which I think is very cool, right? And bassoons and so on, and then like the doubling at the octave and the 10th. Yeah. So like once again, like pretty heavy bass right in here for an impressionist work, and you can see that not only does the weight of like the viola and the horns and so on and so forth sort of obliterate this delicate tremolo right in here, which by the way doesn't need to be triple beam on a stem with an eighth stem, right? It should just be double beam on an eighth stem. So that gives you the tremolo. It could be that part of the reason why it's disappearing in your mock-up could be that it's such a tight, it's interpreting the tremolo so tightly that it's almost strangling it. But like it shouldn't. But all the same, what you're hearing is not just the mock-up, right? here's a situation where I would say that like these wind players who are sitting around doubling the tremolo strings, which you sort of evolve forward into that texture, don't wait. Double them beforehand, right? Give this stuff the support it needs. You got a flute player doing nothing that could be doubling the first violins, right? And you've got this like English horn player, bass clarinet, and so on. They could be doubling some of these things. So don't be shy. Use this effect, and it's a situation too where like you might want to bring it out a little bit, like especially if you're pushing to a forte here. Like this is where everything disappears, everything else disappears. So you push to forte here with your violas, or your cello, excuse me, I meant to say. So you're pushing to forte here with your cello, and it just really. I mean, I know you want that beautiful solo, right? So, yeah. You might be able to solve some of this by, like changing, maybe keeping things higher, like just like keep, yeah, and more doubling on the winds and stuff. Yeah. So anyway, all right. Yeah. Did I say viola before when I was talking about this? I meant to say cello. Yeah. So that cello solo. I almost feel though I would want you to avoid dynamic mixing most of the time. I almost feel like this could be reinterpreted dynamically. So, for instance, like keeping your horns down, and even your contrabassoon down to pianissimo. All right, and then leaving this mostly at piano, and then just getting rid of the forte marking here. Just say piano molto espressivo, and then throw in nuances here, like just that move the that have ebb and flow, and then I think that this would actually sound a whole lot better. Right, and then oboe coming in here, like at forte, doesn't need to be forte yet, right? And look at this, like you have a perception that that these patterns need to be doubled, or at least you're sort of playing them not necessarily with unison doubling, but at the octave and so on. That they need to be mezzo forte. So why are they so soft here that they're like, when you were listening to this mock-up, did you hear that these were invisible, right? So it's just like kind of working things out. Sometimes you can use the mock-up a little bit to check the balance, but don't trust it. But like in some places you could say, well, maybe this is, what is this saying to me? Maybe there is going to be a problem here with the resonance shouting out the really delicate tremolo that I've got in here. Okay, all right. Then continuing on vibraphone. So here I feel like the vibraphone is getting a little buried by all of the stuff around it. And yeah, and the harp as well. Yeah. It's the kind of thing where like even adding an octave in some places would bring out the harp a little bit more. But like just be careful about it. Like how much do you want to stack the octaves up, do do dee do dee do do do. Do you really want that to become quite as prominent? Yeah, I would say like adding some strings to it to make it smoother, right? Just to have it kind of have a more kind of silky kind of a flow, might not be a bad idea. Okay, all right, so yeah, and like I don't know how this crept in, but you don't need a down bow mark here. In fact, it probably wouldn't be used. Down, up, down, right? Because you want the down bow on the forte piano. Just so much easier on down bow than it is on up bow, and it is a down beat, right? Right, and then I really love the exchange of textures here. the strings pushing into these like forte piano brass right in here, trading off to the winds, which go forte piano and sort of back off a little bit, and then you have stopped horns. Now, I would argue against using the stopped horn line. I think that a little plus mark over the stems is much cleaner. Right? It's just a matter of like how, like, the more horizontal lines there are in a score, I just think the more burden to the eye there is. And also, like, it's the thing where you might have a big row of stopped tones, right? And then you have to look at this. You have to jump back. Like the conductor says, "Hey, everybody, let's go back to bar 21 or bar 35 or whatever," and you jump back and you're in the middle of it, and you don't notice that this line means stopped because like there's a bunch of other stuff around it, and you're not seeing the plus sign, right? Because it's way over on the other side of the page. So I think that just avoiding those kinds of things is sort of like the harmonic note, the harmonic circle. Right? These are open strings, not harmonics, but the circle is like really helpful on each note for the same exact reason. All right, so this was all really fun, like the trading off between the two bassoons and then adding bass clarinet and then bass clarinet going up into the wandering solo. And I like the way that you really backed off here on the texture behind it. Like here, I approve of the use of the forte piano. The one problem that I'd have here is like reusing the same instruments again for your melody. Could there have been a contrast, right? Rather than just having the same thing twice, like maybe like bassoon to oboe, that kind of thing. Yeah, and like you completely do not need to go niente here, in no way, shape, or form. Triple P, that's all you need. Like you don't want niente to become an affectation or a crutch, right? So like right in here, like for instance, if we have your cellos continuing on with this tremolo here, and vibraphone, and this part is going to be mezzo forte to the end, and the cellos are going to be playing piano, right? Okay, so you're trying to keep your cellos from outplaying your vibraphone. And you have these other notes in here and so on, and they're coming in and they're fading out, and we have a bass clarinet fading down to piano here. I really see no need for this to be a niente diminuendo right in here, because nobody's paying attention to it, right? So like niente is sort of, it is, even though it is an incredibly subtle sound, it is a special effect, whose efforts to maintain should be paid attention to, right? So if there is no audio difference between fading down to triple P and fading down to niente, especially for a double reed player, which arguably cannot even really do it, then you should just write triple P, okay? All right. Okay, but yeah, this is okay. Not so sure how the harp will come through against the against the horns and the muted trumpet right in there. Still, you're writing them soft, but I would say like pianissimo here, just to let the harp come through better. Okay, all right, and then we get to the little, that section which I have marked as calm surface over a restless undercurrent, and here you have it as an overcurrent, right? You have your octaves kind of glistening above, and all right, nobody's going to hear these harmonics here. There's just too much going on, right? Now it would be better for your harp and your vibraphone to like join in and like just like give a little bit of support to this, because especially as things just really start to heat up and get more and more intense, This is like a section where you are so thick, like the especially in the bass register, it is just really, really, really thick. I mean, I love the way that it is contrasted with the next incredibly light section, right? But maybe it's getting a little too heavy here. That's is what I would say. Just look at the low instruments and so on, and the weight of the like, where the focus is, and like you can hear or you can't hear rather that this just disappears. Yeah, so just really watch out for that. But yeah, but I mean, I like the way that it begins. Bassoons and horns, and I'm not so sure that this subtle effect will ever be even heard. Right, just glissando up to A and back and so on. Just with the framing of this, I don't think anybody is going to really quite pick that up. If there were a little bit of a crescendo there, then they might. But yeah, so we've got our octave violins here, and then we've got the harmonization from below. I don't think they need to necessarily be so separated in terms of the dynamic. Right, and then what is the dynamic here? Is it niente? I think that you mean piano here. All right. Yeah, and mezzo piano ben cantando. So basically, yeah, I mean that's a really nice combination there. Maybe just piano here to balance against the mezzo piano strings. But yeah, and then here you just pile on more and more and more. I think you get the idea, Tim. I mean, it's some really great stuff that you've got going on here, and it's really enjoyable to pick through it and say, have you thought of this, and watch out for that, and things like that. But in the end, I'm not really saying that it has a bunch of flaws. It's just like, how can we make each thing stronger, right? How can we make things connect better? How can we make things clearer, right? Sometimes more instruments does not increase clarity. It confuses the clarity, right? It becomes thicker and harder to understand sometimes. So it's just little issues like that I think that would be really easy for you to fix and tweak and mess around with and experiment with and give you like more experience and a better grounding so that you're ready for your next project, whatever that might be. But in terms of presentation, I think it's actually pretty well presented. I would have liked, as I said before, I would have liked the score or the mock-up, I should say, and the score to reflect the tempo changes that are in a regular performance of this work by a pianist. And I think that if you put those back in, then I think you'll hear that your mock-up just has so much more energy and life to it. So think about some of those things, fixing those things, and mess around with them and see what you think. Am I right on one part or another in terms of some of the aesthetics and some of the colors and so on. All right. But, one way or another, I just want to really thank you for being part of this. And, I always end these videos with thanking everybody. And it's not because I'm obligated to. It's because I really do feel it. After I've gotten to the end of a journey like this, looking through your score for an hour and 20 minutes, I just really feel that, that I'm so happy to be here in New Zealand, sitting at my desk, looking at your score, and with the hope that that what we do together in this challenge will make us both improve, right? Me possibly a better orchestration coach, and seeing things in your score that I've never seen in another score, which is just fascinating. And you possibly getting sharper, adding to your bag of tricks, to your box of tools, and so on. And the fact that we were able to do this and help all those people over, those musicians really struggling right now in Ukraine, I think that really makes it's just really hugely significant. It's not something I can do every year because it's a lot to organize. And especially this upcoming year, I'm going to be organizing quite a bit of things on different projects. It's going to be a huge juggling act, but I'm hoping to get ahead of it before it gets ahead of me, like it did this year. So, so thanks for that support. and for your participation and for working on the score and putting out something so cool and having it become part of the whole history and legacy of these ongoing challenges. And thanks to all my other Patreon supporters and participants and the website subscribers and everybody else. So you know what to do. You've been looking at this score. If you've made it all this way, then you know what to say below. Give Tim some feedback and let him know what you think about his score, even if it's just a compliment, which I think he deserves, because this is such a cool orchestration. Alrighty, so I'll see you again later today with yet another one of these really cool scores.